feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some
I
soccer.
don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college ruled.
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. We're just going to get right into it. We're a couple of comics talking sports. Who are we talking about today?
Today, we will be discussing Joe Theismann.
Joe Theismann, one of the better quarterbacks of his era.
Back on the gridiron, yeah. Had a very interesting career arc.
Yeah,
as
I
far
liked
as
it.
on and off the field. Let's get right into Joe here.
Yep.
Born September 9th, 1949, Joseph Robert Theismann, born in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
New Brunswick. Surprised somebody made it out of there.
Don't worry, it's not like the old Brunswick. It's new. Just like the old Jersey. Anyway, I'm sorry. But born to an Austrian, Joseph John Theismann, who ran a gas station and worked at his brother's liquor store, and his mom, Olga Tobias, a Hungarian who worked for Johnson & Johnson, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
He was raised in South River, New Jersey, and went to South River High School, and was just a sports star from the get-go.
And we see this so much, especially, I swear to God, it's with these quarterbacks, especially is we see them be like the 3-star or 3-sport top, athletes where they're just like, oh, he's the best baseball player and he's our quarterback. And you know what? He's going to play basketball. It's like that kind of shit.
Yeah, shortstop,
Yep.
quarterback, point guard, that type of deal. But he, like you said, baseball, basketball, and football. And he played with future NFL Hall of Famer. He was just inducted this year, Drew Pearson.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
And he played so well, in fact, on the gridiron that he got a scholarship to a then college football powerhouse, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
That's right.
Which, that was a big deal.
I was going to say, in this era, this has got to be a huge one coming out of just like, I imagine his heavy Catholic upbringing.
It was Austrian for sure.
Yes, they were like, oh shit, this is like,
Dream come true, pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah. I mean, if you're a brought up Catholic and Notre Dame offers you money to go there, especially in this era, you go.
You go.
And he goes there in 1967. In 1966, I will add, Notre Dame had just won a national championship.
Yeah.
Went 9-0-1 under quarterback Terry Hanratty. And in those days, as we've brought up multiple times on the podcast, not allowed to play as a true freshman. So Theismann rides the bench. In 1968, Hanratty gets hurt, and they put old Joey in the lineup.
Well, this is him as a sophomore, so he's eligible to play, and I believe there's 3 games left.
Yeah.
And they insert him, and he does, exactly what you want him to do. So
Yeah, he wins 2 games, and they have a tie. And the good thing for Notre Dame is Hanratty is leaving for the NFL after 1968. So you get a nice little sneak preview of what's to come.
I was going to say, it's a perfect transition where you can like play your guy for a couple of games and get everybody into this system of a new quarterback.
Yeah, and Theismann at this time, Notre Dame with their they ran the quarterback a lot in their offense. He's a great athlete, just a great athlete, but unlike some of the other guys, Hanratty did go to the NFL, was a backup on the Steelers during the 70s, but Theismann, man, he could do pretty much anything and really throw the ball. In 1969, they go 8-1-1, has 1,531 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, and 16 picks, which for those days is really good, considering the rudimentary passing game at the time. Also puts up almost 400 yards on the ground and 6 touchdowns. That year, it's the first year they played in a bowl game in like forever, because Notre Dame just refused to play in bowl games up until this point from like the 20s on. They played Texas, who was then ranked number 1, had just come off of beating number 2 Arkansas in the game of the century, actually, around Thanksgiving that year. And they do end up losing 21-17, but they lose to the eventual national champions. So, and,
in the Cotton Bowl.
Cotton Bowl there in Dallas, which, in 1970, there's a lot of hype surrounding Theismann. A lot of hype. In
70, because they go 10-1.
Yeah.
They go back to the Cotton Bowl. Mm-hmm. They beat Dallas. They beat Texas, whatever. But let me say this. So
let's get into this.
In this era, when he gets into college, his last name isn't pronounced Theismann.
It's Theismann.
It's pronounced like Thees, so it's like Theismann, and then somebody
German, Austrian.
Yeah, Austrian. And then somebody at Notre Dame, it's a Theismann. Somebody at Notre Dame was like, hey, you should really say Theismann and rhyme it with the Heisman. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, John Valdesari, the team's marketing guy. And,
that's so marketing.
And he had such a great season. I did want to bring this up, though. Notre Dame that year, and I guarantee you if they ended up pulling it off, he probably would have won it, especially considering they won their bowl game.
Yeah.
They started 9-0 that year. And Theismann had an incredible season. 2,429 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, almost 400 rushing yards again and 4 touchdowns. But at 9-0, they end up losing their last game of the regular season to USC at the Coliseum. They lose 38-28, which in turn knocks them out of the national championship picture. And also in that year's Rose Bowl, Stanford plays, and Jim Plunkett, who would later become the number 1 pick in the following year's NFL draft, plays so well against Ohio State that he wins the Theismann.
We've all got plunked by Plunkett, so I mean, there you go. It's kind of a ridiculous thing when you think about it, where they really lost that one game and it knocked them out of the. Because he gets second.
Yeah, he basically gets second. Notre Dame, I think, finishes second
and
that
he goes,
year.
Should I go back to Theismann?
Yeah, it didn't.
Should I go back?
Should I go back? It didn't work for me now. But he was an All-American that year, an academic All-American, and he finished his career, and he still ranks 5th on Notre Dame's all-time passing yards list, which is pretty damn good.
Pretty damn good.
He was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame in 2003, and he's alongside other Notre Dame Heisman-winning quarterbacks in Angelo Bertelli, Johnny Lujak, and a man we did an episode on, Paul Hornung.
That's right.
Did want to bring this up. So no more college eligibility left. He goes to the 71 draft. This is actually thought to be one of like the biggest quarterback stack drafts.
I was wondering why he dropped so low.
So he's not like a really bigger dude.
Yeah.
Like these 3 guys. He's 6 foot, about 200 pounds. Not like huge, but big enough to play, especially in that era's NFL.
But he's thought of as a great college quarterback
And a great athlete.
but not going to make it on that next level because he almost doesn't have the body type.
Yeah, and the 3 guys, and this is the first year in NFL history quarterbacks went 1, 2, and 3 in the draft. Number 1, obviously Plunkett to the New England Patriots. At number 3, the Houston Oilers selected Dan Pastorini out of Santa Clara. And at number 2, the New Orleans Saints took this guy. I don't think him or his offspring were very good quarterbacks. Archie Manning?
Archie?
Yeah, something like that. But he's a good enough athlete, Theismann. He's a good enough athlete to be drafted in the 4th round, 99th overall by the Miami Dolphins.
Well, I thought it was a very low pick, but when I read into it, it was he got picked very low, but reading into it, it was looked at that he was going to be like a backup quarterback. He wasn't going to be anything else other than that.
And the Dolphins already had Bob Greasy.
Yep.
They were coming off a good 1970 season where they had made the playoffs. They're just about to start dominating the AFC and NFL. And Theismann never plays a snap for the Miami Dolphins.
Well, he doesn't feel like he's a backup quarterback. He feels like he's a starting quarterback, so he goes all the way up to where Santa lives. All the way to Toronto, and he plays for the Argonauts.
You think that socialized medicine is keeping Santa alive? I really do.
You're damn right.
I'm damn right.
I found it interesting. So he goes to the CFL because he can pretty much get a starting job. And in 71, he gets a contract for $50,000 a year.
Yeah, and he performs up to that contract. They go 10-4. The Argos, he leads the conference in most statistical passing categories, and they make it all the way to the Grey Cup, which is Canada's Super Bowl, and they end up losing, unfortunately, to the Calgary Stampeders. But that year, he has 17 touchdowns, 2,440 yards. 72 is kind of a down year for him, and he's kind of talked about this because this was the year the Dolphins had their perfect season.
Yep.
Where he's sitting up in Canada going, what the hell did I just do?
He talks about this because it was very much like I messed up my future, my career kind of thing.
I have to be cold all the time.
Yep.
God damn it. Santa won't return my calls. No, 72, the injury limits him to about half his statistics as the year before. 73, he's back on track, almost 2,500 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, and he's a CFL All-Star.
Yes.
In his first and last of 3 years in Canada.
Well, I think this is the one where it proves that he could be, or somebody in the NFL should give him a shot, if that makes sense.
They didn't exile him there like Doug Flutie.
Exactly.
Exactly. You know, it's more or less like the NFL, especially crappier teams like the one we'll get into at the time, they're desperate. And in 1974, the then Washington Redskins, they trade a 1976 first-round pick so he can become a member of their team.
I was surprised it was a first-rounder, but I imagine they saw the potential that he had, that the CFL was kind of a viable league at that time, so they were like, oh, okay, he could really air the ball out, so we should get him. Like you were saying, he was an overall great athlete.
Well, one of the things, I think this was the era in which George Allen was still coaching the Redskins, and I don't know if you know this, but George Allen hated using the draft to build his team. He just wanted to make his team elderly, and he didn't trust rookies, so he would deal draft picks just willy-nilly, and it ends up costing them because in this mid to late 70s, the Redskins are mediocre at best.
Well, they don't have any kind of refreshing.
Exactly. Yeah. But he is a backup to Billy Kilmer in 74 and 75, and he's doing some punt returning.
I thought that was interesting. He's actually kind of in the team as a punt returner because he's such a great athlete, and they just kind of want, I imagine, to get him into the system.
It's like that Taysom Hill guy for the Saints, who also wears number 7, and it's so cool to watch old Theismann highlights, not necessarily when he's returning punts, but he is wearing the one-bar face mask.
Oh, I thought that was amazing because he kind of sticks with that his whole career, is just this old-school one-bar.
No, almost. I don't think he had a chin strap for some of it.
I was just going to think about that, like literally just ready to fly off kind of helmet.
But in 1976 and 1977, he starts to play a little bit more. They go 7-4 when he's starting, 2,100 passing yards, 15 touchdowns. And then in 1978, he finally gets his chance. So he's 29 years old, and now he's a full-time starter in the NFL.
I feel like this is like Sabonis, where it's just like, oh, he's a 29-year-old rookie. You're just like, Jesus Christ, man.
We've been waiting. Take us to the Sabone zone. Nothing rhymes with Theismann besides Theismann.
He's coming out. He's just like, my kids are in middle school, guys. Can we get this going?
Oh, God. 78 was a weird year for Washington, though. They started the year 6-0 under new coach Jack Pardee, but they completely collapsed down the stretch. Theismann is 7-7 as a starter. Almost 2,600 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, 18 picks. And then in 79, it really starts kind of coming together for him. They go 10-6, but unfortunately miss the playoffs. He has almost 2,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 18 interceptions, which you can see him start like now that he's kind of acclimated to the offense and things are getting better for him.
And the Redskins are getting better. He's a kind of quarterback that needs like a good team around him. He's not going to get these ridiculous stats, if that makes sense.
No, and like the pieces are starting to get there.
Yep.
But they just need the right guy to run the organization. In 1980, they end up having another mediocre year. He has almost 3,000 yards passing, 17 touchdowns. But in 1981, they get Joe Gibbs in as head coach, and they really start to put stuff together.
I was going to say, so like I imagine sometimes when you're inside of the team, it's hard to like really understand what's needed. And in 81, when Joe Gibbs came in, he was just like, okay, so this team needs this, this, and this, and we're going to be a viable team.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of, like, I see this a lot of the time with soccer when teams are just like, oh, literally we needed somebody from the outside to come in and be like, no, you guys are fucking up just right here.
Exactly.
Fill this gap, and you guys are going to be amazing. And that's what we see is Joe Gibbs comes in and pretty much takes not a mediocre team, but like a good team and makes them a great team.
But he really helps them out because in 81, although they go 8-8 with some growing pains, adjusting to the new offense that Gibbs brings in. They're finally starting to build the offensive line known as the Hogs, which is great. Yeah. Theismann has almost 3,600 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and then 82 starts, and they get John Riggins back. And that is the piece with a bruising offensive line. They get in Joe Washington in a trade from Baltimore, who's a nice little scat back who can help in your passing game. Like, everything seems to be going well for the Redskins heading into 82, and then the strike happens. And not the fun strike where they get Shane Falco and all those replacement players. This was a strike which cut the season basically in half.
I was going to say, was it 8 games? Or
9 games.
9 games?
Yeah, they canceled 7 games that year.
Yep.
But in the 9 games, the Redskins are just an absolute force in the NFC. They go 8-1. They lose only 1 game.
And they're dominating with this ground and pound and this, like, Theismann's. This is where I felt
great
like
receivers like Charlie Brown and Art Monk, who's later in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I'm just saying, this is where Theismann can really, like, show his ability to pick the right passes and them to just, like,
got protection now.
Everything is working in this Redskins' favor, where Joe Gibbs is just like, no, we're the best team. Why are we striking? What's happening here?
Right.
Like, that's what I imagine.
Go back to work.
Yeah, seriously. And you see it on, like, shittier teams where they're just like, we should strike. I bet the Redskins were just like, no.
For the love of God, let us play.
We're winning.
Both seasons were 87 when they had the strike.
Yeah.
They won again. But, and sorry to spoil that, but these stats, mind you, are only in 9 games. 2,033 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and he makes his first Pro Bowl. He makes his first Pro Bowl at 33 years of age. And
just a young kid.
And then the playoffs start, and this was the first year where you had wild card and like a divisional playoff bowl.
Oh, okay.
So you played an extra, basically, playoff game. They expanded the playoff field. They beat the Lions in the first round, 30. They start rolling through people, by the way. The Lions in the playoffs, not always a good combination. No. 31-7. Then they play the Vikings. And this is, like, the playoffs most known for Riggins, just them handing him the ball and getting 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They beat the Vikings 21-7, and then they draw in the NFC title game the Dallas Cowboys. Much like in our theme, don't you just hate the Cowboys, Chris?
Well, it's interesting because you see this rivalry with the Redskins and the Cowboys, and it really is because they keep meeting for years upon years in the playoffs. Here's one of them.
Yeah, and this is Dallas's 3rd NFC title game in a row. They had lost the previous 2. Against Philadelphia and then San Francisco. And with a devastating defense and John Riggins, they roll right through them. And Theismann has some really good passes in this game. They end up winning 31-17, and they're on to the Super Bowl to play Joe Theismann's, the team that drafted Joe Theismann, the Miami Dolphins.
I love this in its little spiderwebness is, like, if you want to get a guy to be, like, as jazzed or whatever you want to call it, as excited to play a team as you can, have that team draft him and then not give him a contract and then trade him, and then he comes back. It's just like, no. He's looking for that tuna that's not dolphin safe. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Have you seen him, like, in the pregame huddle talking to the guys? At the very end of his speech, he's like, and it's worth a big fucking ring.
Yeah, fuck yeah. He was so excited for this. It was everything. It was everything. The team that passed on him, the Super Bowl let's be honest, he's at the twilight of his career.
And this was a Super Bowl that it featured a kind of a clash of styles, because you have Joe Gibbs and his high-powered offense against the Miami Dolphins under Shula and defensive coordinator Bill Arnsparger with the Killer Bees defense, man. Because, like, I think 6 or 7 guys on their starting defensive unit had the last name start with B.
Oh, yeah.
And this is actually an underrated Super Bowl as far as a lot of the big plays that happened. It was the first one to have a kickoff return for a touchdown in it. And Miami's defense is holding Washington at bay until Theismann makes probably the play of the game outside of what happens with John Riggins later.
I was going to say the play of the game on the defensive side.
As a defensive back?
What the hell is happening? They sub him in. They say, you're going to play center.
You're going to play cornerback. He takes it 80 yards for a pick six. No, that's not what happens. They're down near their own goal line. He tries to get a pass off, but Kim Camper of the Dolphins kind of bats it in the air. And the way he kind of volleyballs it, he has a chance to make the play because it's just a dead, free ball.
Just in the air.
Yeah, and Theismann, to his credit, sees it, and he's able to kind of finagle himself between Camper and the ball and knocks it down.
Which this was such a big play because they were talking about if he had caught it right here, there really wasn't anybody else around other than Theismann, and he really could have shrugged him off and ran possibly.
Yeah, even if he doesn't get the pick six, they have the ball first and goal.
Exactly.
And they're up 17-13. If they score a touchdown because there's no 2-point conversion late in the third quarter, that's the game.
That's the game.
But
so this is one of the best, and it calls back to his athleticism and his awareness where he sees this. He's just like, oh shit, I gotta get on this. And
academic All-American. He's a smart guy.
There you go.
But later in the game, John Riggins has that famous NFL Films highlight on fourth down where they only need like an inch, and he scoots down the sideline for a touchdown. And Joe Theismann is a Super Bowl champion along with the Washington Redskins.
That's got to feel really great. So I just
7-17.
This is the thing that I always think of is like their top of their career back to like their bottom. So in 72,
yep,
the thought of him was just being like, I'm an idiot. I messed this up.
I'm so cold.
And now he's looking at it in 82. He's just like, I am a Super Bowl champion over the team that didn't
give me a contract. That didn't think I was good enough. That thought I would just sit behind Bob Greasy holding a clipboard. But
that's why I loved
do it.
Yeah, that's why I love this little decade right here because it's really great. Him being this Super Bowl champion is one of those where you're just like, fuck yeah, he really deserves that one.
So if you thought they were good in 82, the Washington, they're even better in 83, and so is Theismann. I mean, before you had Brady and Manning and that 98 Vikings team, this was arguably the greatest offense in NFL history. They set a then-league record for points. They go 14-2. Theismann wins the MVP of the league, first team AP All-Pro, and has a career year with 3,714 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and a league best 8.3 yards per attempt.
And people were saying that Theismann could be the best quarterback of this era, and people weren't scoffing at it. If you look at these 2 years, because it kind of, I mean, really, he's just too old when he comes in, to be honest. But like these 2 years, he is absolutely the best quarterback statistic-wise.
And he's on fire because Gibbs finally has the personnel to run that offense that he brought with him from San Diego. 83 is the year John Riggins sets the then record for rush touchdowns in a season with 24. I mean, they're really firing on all cylinders.
Yeah,
all
they're the best.
Long.
Yeah.
And they go into the playoffs as prohibitive favorites, not only for the NFC, but for the Super Bowl. They lay the Rams in the divisional round and beat them 51-7.
Yeah.
They basically tell Eric Dickerson to go the fuck home. But the following week, I don't know if you watched any of this game. It's probably one of the greatest NFC championships ever played between the 49ers and Washington. It's at RFK Stadium. Theismann, the defense and special teams, end up staking them a 21-0 lead that they hold through the fourth quarter. And then a fellow Golden Domer quarterback for the 49ers says, I got this.
Yeah.
Brings them all the way back, 21 points in the fourth quarter, until Theismann leads the offense, gets him into field goal range, and they end up escaping with a Mark Mosley field goal, who had a terrible kicking day that day, by the way.
I heard somebody say something. They were like, everybody talks about this being a great game. It wasn't a great game. It was a great fourth quarter.
Yeah,
that's literally
it was,
what.
But it was exciting as shit.
Yeah, for the whole game, it was just like, this is kind of boring. And then literally the fourth quarter, it was like, this is amazing.
This is amazing. And the Redskins win their second consecutive NFC title, and they go into the Super Bowl, and everyone's ready to crown them. Everyone's ready, like all excited.
I was going to say, everyone's looking at this team as like, the 49ers were the test. This was like they're going in heavy favorites.
Yeah, and the Raiders were almost an afterthought coming into this game, but what a lot of people forget is in 82, they likely should have made it. They were somehow upset by the Jets in the playoffs. I think they were like 8-1 or 7-2 also. And in 83, they just end up dominating the competition in the AFC. They end up beating the Steelers divisional round, and then they beat the Seahawks, who had beat them twice in the regular season, oddly enough.
Interesting.
Yeah, they beat them at the Coliseum. And everyone's picking the Redskins. Everyone's picking Theismann. And the wheels just come the fuck off in
I was
this
going to
game.
say,
It's the oddest game I've ever Super Bowl. It's really weird. The Raiders get a touchdown on a blocked punt right before halftime.
Everything is going in favor. Every 50-50 chance is going to the Raiders, and on top of that, they're just playing a better team. And for some reason, I feel like for the first time in 2 years, the Redskins have a horrible game.
Well, I think a lot of it is earlier in the regular season, they played a game at RFK against Los Angeles, and throughout the entire game, it was just back and forth. The Raiders hung with them. There was a big play, and this is what kind of blew the whole game wide open in favor of Los Angeles was they ran a screen play to Joe Washington that he took 70 yards for a touchdown. The Raiders defensive coordinator and middle linebacker, good old Matt Millen. It was right before halftime. They knew exactly it was the same play they were going to run. They put the pass defense linebacker and Jack Squire diagnoses the play, takes it to the house when honestly Washington should have just been kneeling the ball and playing for halftime. Theismann's even said that was just a huge mistake for us to do it. Marcus Allen set a then Super Bowl record for rush yards in a game. And the highest scoring offense in NFL history to the point loses 38-9.
They literally didn't have a touchdown in the first half.
Yeah.
It's really, like you said, the wheels really came off of this offense.
I think a lot of it is overconfidence, and I think a lot of it is just film study and the Raiders knowing what was coming.
I was going to say maybe a little bit overconfidence on the Redskins and a lack of preparation, and the Raiders didn't have that because they felt like they were ready at whatever they were going to throw at them.
Howie Long's crew cut came that day.
Oh, my God. So the back-to-back Super Bowls just didn't happen.
Yeah, and it was kind of, you see that shot of Theismann leaving the field with the shoulder pad hanging all off and his one-bar face mask. You're like, that is the look of despair and sadness on this poor man.
Well, he knows this is something that I feel like with his age, he knows highly doubtful he'll ever come back. Even though the Redskins are a great team, that it's such a ridiculously hard thing to even come back to a Super Bowl.
He's 35 by the next season. By the 84 season. They're still good. They win the NFC East. They go 11-5. Has almost 3,400 passing yards, 24 touchdowns. But this was the year the Bears finally put shit together. And they go and play Chicago and lose to 23-19. And their season is just finished. And Theismann's getting another year older. They go into 85, still a talented team, and things seem to be going okay for Washington and him that season until November 18th, 1985. Let's talk about this Monday Night Football game, Chris.
A Monday night that will live in infamy. So
Juice was in the booth, everybody.
It's interesting. I believe it was a tied game. It was 7-7. It was
second quarter.
Second quarter. It was early on, and we got a man, by the name of Lawrence, motherfucking. So
I hurt my nose, Coach.
I was just gonna reference that. We got LT, and then who was the other guy? Harry
Carson.
Harry Carson.
Yeah.
And you see LT come on his weak side, on his blind side.
And this is a big reason why Gibbs started using the H-back in his offense.
Interesting.
As a second tight end in H-back, because by this point in Lawrence Taylor's career, you couldn't stop him. The best way to contain him was was basically double team him with either, you can't block him with just a tight end. You'll need a lineman, but if you can get, instead of a fullback in the backfield, a move tight end H-back to just chip him and give yourself a fucking shred of hope.
Because if you watch him, he literally goes right through whatever defender is right there, catches him on the blind side, and kind of spins him a little. This is what Theismann said, that he felt like he kind of spun him, and
it was just awkward. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't intentional.
Not at all.
And it spun him in a way to where his lower right leg was
vulnerable,
and Oh, God. You can go and watch it on YouTube, but essentially he mangles his leg in very disgusting fashion.
Well, you see, it's wild because you see Carson come in. LT kind of spins him a little, and then Carson kind of comes in and just essentially flattens his leg. So
it holds it in place for other people to come crashing into it.
Yes, that's really what happens.
And the shitty part for Washington is they had called the flea flicker where Theismann handed it off to Riggins, who tossed it back to him. If you're not familiar with football, running a flea flicker is a very long developing play. And when you have Lawrence Taylor and the caliber of pass rushers the Giants have, you got to take those shots pretty infrequently. And
if at all.
Yeah, if at all.
That's what they were saying was, so he ends up having a compound fracture of his tibia and fibula.
Yeah, he breaks both bones in his lower leg for
essentially
not doctors.
Yep.
But you want me to get into his quote on it?
The quotes are so great.
So this is what Theismann said about it. The pain was unbelievable, but it didn't last more than a second or two. My legs snapped like a breadstick. I heard it clearly. It sounded like two muzzled gunshots over my left shoulder. Pow, pow. It was at that point I also found out, this is the weird part, by the way, what a magnificent machine the human body is. Almost immediately, from the knee down, all the feeling went away in my lower right leg. The endorphins kicked in, and I was not in any great pain.
Which is wild because it was.
Oh my! It's so ugly. Like,
let me say the break is so bad that his leg ends up being shorter for the rest of his life.
Yeah, it's like an inch or two shorter because the bone growth didn't happen. Because how many people experience an injury like that outside of war or something?
Well, they said that on Monday Night for Monday Night Football, it was voted the most shocking moment.
And after the play happens, because obviously the guys who are around him can hear what it sounds like.
Yes.
Lawrence Taylor goes running to the Redskins sideline, waving his arms. And when you can freak Lawrence Taylor out like that.
Well, it was kind of ridiculous because the Redskins thought he was taunting him. And then finally, a couple of seconds into it, they realized he's something was wrong over here. We have bones sticking out, please.
Yeah, because it's shot through. I mean, when a compound fracture like that, it's just horrendous. And what I found, and this speaks to just Theismann's character also, is Taylor, since the incident, has always been trying to apologize. And Theismann's you have nothing to be sorry about. That's just a freak thing that happened.
Which it wasn't a cheap shot. It wasn't anything like that. It was totally a freak accident. And they've actually done commercials together and stuff like that, which have just made fun of it.
Yeah.
Because Theismann really is, because it ends up ending
It costs his career. It ends his career. You want to hear a really weird spider web?
Oh, you're going to Alex Smith me?
Yeah. Oh, damn it. I thought I could have got you. The Alex Smith.
Give it to me, man.
All right. So Alex Smith, who was a quarterback for Washington, basically up until I think last season, he had the exact same injury, only it was J.J. Watt this time, not a dirty play, much like Lawrence Taylor. The same spot on the field.
Let me give you a couple more. J.J. Watt and LT, a couple of the only players to ever win Defensive Player 3 times.
Oh, sweet Jesus, it gets crazier.
Both times. So I believe it's left guard who plays on the blind side?
Left tackle.
Left tackle. Yeah. Both times the starting left tackle was out for both Redskins teams, and that's why it was so wide open, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, what? Swinging gate, everyone! At least he didn't run a flea flicker.
And then I thought it was awesome that Theismann was actually at the Alex Smith injury. He was in the stadium.
Oh,
and he saw it happen, because this is what people were saying, was Alex Smith literally breaks the exact same bones that he broke, but luckily, because medicine has gotten better, Alex Smith was actually able to come back, and he doesn't have a ridiculous limp.
Have you seen what his leg looks like?
Yes,
now?
it is.
It is gruesome,
but it's not an inch shorter. He's a knife sharpener. You know what I mean? Right? So it's an interesting thing because the similarities in this injury is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, and unfortunately, I've always had the what if with Theismann though is, Because like immediately after that, they turned to like Jay Schrader and then Doug Williams and then Mark Rippon, just like a series of quarterbacks to run Gibbs' system.
Yeah, that aren't necessarily fitting in like Theismann did.
But it's weird to think because, I mean, granted, in 1985, he's 36 years old, right? Could he have like, I'm not saying he would have gone full George Blanda or like Tom Brady, but could he have played till 40 if he
Possibly.
wanted to? I mean, if this doesn't happen, because this ends, it's over. His pro and football career is over after this.
Well, you think of it, and no offense to the CFL, but you think of it as him almost having a couple of years of low impact football, if you will. So maybe he gets those years at the end of his career like tacked on, and maybe he goes to 40. It's tough to see.
It's tough to say, or even see. But yeah, because who the hell knows? 86, he's probably the starter again.
I was just going to say, 86, they come back and they almost have the same team running the same stuff. I mean, it's...
Then in 87, they win a Super Bowl. Who the hell knows what happens?
It's kind of a crazy thing, and I feel bad for him, but if he gets drafted by the Dolphins, maybe he never wins a Super Bowl.
Or if he gets drafted by another team, maybe he signs and just gets the hell beat out of him because he doesn't have those years in Canada.
And he never becomes a starter. There's so many things that, like, in 72, I bet he was feeling like shit. And then in 82, he's on top of the world, baby.
Yeah. But Theismann parlays that. He's a very charismatic guy, if you don't know who he is. Right into broadcasting. Like, even immediately after, he's doing Super Bowl 19 for ABC.
Yes.
Like, maybe months after his surgery. And then he works for CBS in 86, 87 on a broadcasting team. And then, most famously, how I knew about him, for basically a decade and a half, he did Sunday Night Football with Mike Patrick and Paul McGuire on ESPN.
That's how I knew him.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, that is one of the most underrated broadcast teams in NFL history. I mean, everyone talks about Madden and Summerall, but like Sunday Night Football was an event. I loved it. And those three were just perfect for it. Like a great way to end up wrapping up your weekend. And he also did ESPN Monday Night Football in 2006. So, I mean, a long career in the public light, always around the Redskins, or now Commanders organization too, one for life. So, yeah. Joe Theismann, very up and down, interesting career for an interesting guy.